second annual Hardware Summit happened this year on November 6, 2019, and even though there were raging fires and rolling blackouts around the San Francisco Bay Area, about 200 people still managed to show up. Hardware entrepreneurs and service providers gathered together to network, and there were also 3 talks where experienced pros in this field shared their wisdom with the crowd to help prevent them from repeating the mistakes that they would see over and over in hardware startups. We'll share clips from each of these talks in this video. The first was on strategy, the second was on operations, and the third was a fireside chat regarding the current events around trade policies, IP, and supply chain for hardware startups.
I was at a consumer robotic company, and I was running the beta testing program, amongst other things. But I had a very large beta testing team. And during that time, my husband, I know this will shock you all, my husband and I are early adopters of technology. I'm sure you're all very shocked by this. And so we bought Alexa within the first week. You know Alexa, the Amazon thing? And so at this point, I was running a 100-person team, and my husband set Alexa up to do the lights in our house. However, every day I'd come home after running this very large team and have to ask my husband to ask Alexa to turn off the lights, because Alexa couldn't understand me. And I think this is an important point about diversity on a team, and particularly within testing. What happened was I ended up getting a bunch of people off the Amazon testing team. They came over, they heard me griping about this one day at lunch, and they said, "Oh, don't you know? They forgot to include any women on the testing team. And because of that, they forgot to test for the frequency of women's voices." I don't have a particularly high-pitched voice even, right? So you can imagine. So the point being, when you think about a company as big as Amazon and how big their testing team might be and all the different angles they're thinking of, and they forgot to test for a woman's voice, that is how you need to think about your testing, that there are so many angles that you aren't understanding because of your particular purview. And it's not just women versus men or young versus old. It's actually diversity in disciplines even. You need philosophy majors and psychology majors and all these different people looking at this from all the different angles, particularly when it comes to artificial intelligence. And I think that's the really interesting thing we're seeing as teams develop in this new day and age of deep tech.
A weird story. I was actually on an internship for my PhD, and in my PhD they paid me to come up with ideas, and I'm so busy, like, sweating bullets at work, like, oh god, I need an idea, that I wasn't coming up with anything particularly exciting. And then when I took some time off, I had the easiest job in the world, and I had time to take up my hobbies, which involved woodworking, and that's when I had the best idea of all, right? So that was great. So I had the idea, and I realized, oh, this is, potentially a company, and quit my internship, decided to develop a whole prototype before I went back to MIT so that I could say that I had developed the idea independently. I did that, I went back to MIT, I wanted to finish my degree. I got my professor to agree to switch my PhD subject to be the subject of my invention. And, but then the entanglement comes up with MIT is a technology licensing office, they own all the IP and so on, and I wasn't sure whether I wanted to involve them, even though I didn't have to, because their pitch was, hey, we'll do all the work for patenting your invention, and we'll even help you with networking in return for certain rights. And I said, that's actually a potentially interesting deal. In the end, what I did is I talked to everyone I could, and finally I found somebody who had just quit the TLO, and I wish I could say I bought her a beer and got her to spill the beans, but she spilled the beans on the phone without any alcohol, and she was like, honestly, the TLO, once it gets in your pants, they're going to be in your pants for the rest of your life. That was her analogy, not mine. And, so just don't do it, because it's going to make, they can even take away your right to use the invention if they think you're not commercializing it fast enough. And I said, well, no thanks to that, and so we ended up getting a waiver from MIT saying they had no right to the idea and patented it independently. We did find a company that would do so on deferred expenses. In retrospect, I wish we'd gone with a better IP firm, even if we had to pay up front, as I'm sure you're well aware. Bad lawyers cost more in the long run than the most expensive lawyers can find. So that's my IP entanglement story.
I think looking at your founding team is important when you also look at your product. So what's the product you're creating? And is it a product that's just for one part of the population, or is it a product that's for men and women or underrepresented groups? And then thinking that through and building a team that represents that consumer group that you want to serve is really key early on. That sounds easier than it's done because you probably don't have those people in your network, but there's a lot of different tools you can use and networks that you can tap into to find those people. And yes, I think it's very important to have co-founders at the beginning that you know very well, that you trust, that you go through thick and thin with. But then when you start hiring your salespeople, your CFOs, et cetera, start thinking about building diverse teams and then building a community around your startup that represents the community that will buy your product, and start testing with that community early on.
I laugh whenever I see Shark Tank and they say, "Do you have a patent?" And they say, "Yes." And they're like, "Oh, okay, good." It's like, it depends on what's in the patent application and what it covers and how enforceable and how easy it is to design around, because sometimes you've got a good idea, but someone can figure out a different way to do it that is almost as good or maybe even better. And so a lot of it takes some detailed analysis to understand what the value of those applications are. And so you want to balance all of these strategic elements. Obviously, you can patent something that's no one wants to buy. So obviously, that's really important to have a go-to-market strategy and proof that customers want to build it. And it's one of the saddest things I ever see is inventors that are spending years building something that is, that phrase from the movie, "If you build it, they'll come." They don't always come. And so you want to test it.
What things that if you just wing it and you don't really know what you're doing, you could cause catastrophic failure with?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when it comes to shipping product, think it's a fairly commoditized process or thing to do. Although I kind of equate it to like having kids. I'm a father of 2 daughters, right? Like billions of people before me have had kids, and so therefore it should be easy, and it's not at all. And the same is true of everything that happens after the product is made. So a product comes from this contract manufacturer, let's say in China or domestically, doesn't matter. What happens next has been done by thousands and thousands, if not millions, of companies before you. And so therefore the assumption is that this might be easy, I can wing it, everybody else has done it, I'm going to go focus on this other aspect of my business that nobody has done before. And admittedly, like, that's probably why you're starting a startup, right? Is because you're doing something new and unique. But unfortunately, the things that seem obvious tend to be the ones that bite sometimes the hardest, where missing something that seems commoditized or simple can result in maybe extra dollars per unit in shipping cost. And it could have been easily avoidable, it could have been obvious. But at the end of the day, it kills your margins entirely, right? And so I think not overlooking what feels commoditized is really important.
I have observed, and maybe you would contradict me, and that's fine, go ahead. But from all my travels, I found that the startups in San Francisco, the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, you have a culture that's really weird compared to the rest of the world, and that's that you often have a tendency to treat hardware development like software development. And I've even seen some vice presidents of engineering who are pushing forward basically a hardware product with supplementary software, and they have a software background and no hardware background whatsoever, and this is mind-blowing to me. So, again, contradict me if you don't agree with this sentiment, but how have you seen this first? And then how is bringing hardware to life different than software development in general?
Yeah, 100%. I see this over and over again. I can't count the number of companies that I have that come in pitching me saying we're going to make hardware development move at the speed of software development. And I cringe anytime anyone tells me that. It's like, there are very good reasons why hardware should not move at the speed of software. Like, once you cut a tool, like, I'm sorry, like, there's no going back. Like, it's going to be very expensive to make major design changes at that point. And once you ship a product out into the field, OTA software updates can only get you so far. Like, it's impossible to call all those units back and repair a PCB.
And how do VCs see hardware versus software?
Yeah, a lot of VCs won't touch hardware. I think Root Ventures is one of the handful of VCs in the Valley that actually embrace hardware, and it's because VCs don't always understand the time requirements and also the capital requirements, that there's NRE, that there's tooling, that there's inventory costs, and from our perspective, we see it as high risk, high reward. Like, we know how to analyze the risks, so we embrace it, but not a lot of VCs in the Valley do.
Yeah, hardware typically takes a long time, but we're going to do things differently. Famous last words, and we hear it all the time. There's a reason why hardware takes a long time. There's lots of new methods for 3D printing and prototyping and all of these things, and they're fantastic for a proof of concept, fantastic to get you to the first point quickly. But when it comes to production, you still need to open your hard tool, you still need to do your product development, you still need to plan for your testing, you need to plan for assembly, plan for materials, plan for cost at BOM, and you only open your tool when you know that what you have is the best product you're going to get. And there's always compromises. You can have the most beautiful industrial design in the world, and it may not be manufacturable. There's always draft angles, there's always material restrictions, there's always process restrictions, there's cost restrictions, and all of these things are decisions that once you make them, there's no going back. So decisions take longer to make because you don't get to reverse, and there's a lot more decisions, and every decision has an investment with it. Once you open your tooling, thousands of dollars. Once you pull the trigger on fabricating PCBAs at a factory, you're probably building 1,000 or more units. That's thousands of dollars. Once you put something into a lab to certify and you suddenly want to change something, that's thousands of dollars again. So it's slower. Like Chrissy said, it's more methodical. You have to follow a process. You have to take risks, but they have to be calculated risks.
Just one last comment on that. Talking about like over-the-air updates and the thought of moving really, really fast. I think the good news is there are things you can do to mitigate. I think building a flexible supply chain is important, not just before the contract manufacturer and bringing components in, but after the product leaves the production facility. You know, over-the-air updates in the field can save you, but can also be burdensome and can be problematic and sometimes impossible. So thinking about where are the opportunities in between, if the product is landed at a 3PL, third-party logistics warehouse like ours, you know, the unfortunate truth is, like, I'm the only one up here without a technical background, and I promise you, I would bet a lot of money on this, that myself and my employees have more experience flashing firmware than anybody up here. I don't know anything about how it was written. I just know the PCs were handed to us. We did, you know, or the smartphones, whatever it was. But having that last little bit of agility and flexibility somewhere in the middle, if you think about some of those opportunities, can be big savers.
So I do optical engineering, and we do optical virtual prototyping, and you can do virtual prototyping in lots of different parts of hardware design. You can do that for mechanical fit, you can do that for thermal simulations and electrical engineering. But I see that very often just completely missed. So that's where I see opportunities missed for more efficient development in terms of either cost or time savings. What are some things that you've seen?
The thing that I see hardware startups miss a lot is that you put off reliability testing until late in the product development cycle. And I understand that in the early stages, you're very much in design, you're moving as fast as you can, but I've worked on projects before where we did not front-load reliability testing, and we did a decent amount of reliability testing up front, but we were on the back end of the schedule. We had a lot of inventory built up. We were already shipping product out of China to our 3PLs in the US, and just as like a quick sanity check, we threw some devices into like a heat soak chamber. And we changed our methodology a little bit. We wanted to do a slightly more aggressive test, so we did it with the units powered on and fully functioning while they were in the heat soak chamber. And 80% of them failed. And I mean, like, failed in like a catastrophic, like, cannot use the unit at all kind of way.
My answer is going to be way more boring than that. To me, efficiency is in the detail. So when you start off your project, a lot of people want to get straight from their minimum viable prototype to production. and they want to skip all of the PD stuff because they have this thing in their hand that works, and that's great, and they're really happy with it. But reality is, you need your product requirements document, you need your CMF, you need your test plan, you need your REL plan, and I know this is super boring, but this is how you get through the phases, this is how you tick the boxes, and then when you're shipping your product, you're shipping something that's really qualified. So efficiency doesn't come by taking shortcuts or taking risks along the way. Efficiency comes by, again, using the experience of people who've done it before, following that path forward, and just being as sensible as you can along the way while moving as fast as you can in that process.
Thank you guys for joining us. You know, there's been so much in the news lately about obviously this trade war, and it seems to change every day. So it's hard to get a handle on it, and especially hard as a startup to know what to do, you know, how it's going to affect your company, how you should be thinking about your supply chain. A lot of our supply chain and hardware necessarily has to come from overseas. It's just not cost competitive to do it here in the US. So we are going to get all the insights and the latest information from our fireside chat guests here tonight. So why don't we start with maybe a starting point? You know, where are we? Can you give us kind of the up-to-date information?
Okay, so first of all, we aren't where we appear to be. I mean, President Trump seems to be following the stock market more than the reality of the negotiations. The original basis, if you want to dial this back, for this trade war was about our view that China was engaging in forced technology transfer, which meant that China was engaging in cyber intrusions into U.S. websites, compelling U.S. companies to transfer technology as a condition of investment, had a weak IP system, was investing in U.S. companies to acquire the technology and take it out, and also some other nefarious activities. Most of the legal issues that we asked for in the March 22, 2018 report on that topic, surprisingly, were given to us by China. You don't read about that in the press. We asked China to change its technology transfer law. It was changed. We asked China to change its foreign investment law. It was changed. And a range of other laws were also changed, including their trade secret law. So we're at a very odd moment in time where it seems to me that he's manipulating the outcomes to try to get the maximum advantage that he can for the election, for the farmers, and that he's also interjected a high degree of unpredictability into tariffs. And I think I'll let Phil fill in on the tariff side.
Sure, yeah, so I mean, just coming from a wonky political scientist side of things, right, there's this thing called the Thucydides trap. That is to say, throughout history, when you have two great powers, there's not enough room for both of them. You have a rising power, you have a great power, and they're going to compete with one another at some point. So, in many ways, one could look at what's happening now rather than guns is happening there. So a lot of people like to take World War I as a counterexample to, well, purely and economically, you're not going to have a war. But the thing to keep in mind in World War I, when we were looking at Germany and Great Britain, was that in fact that many of the goods were actually produced all like within the country and have the sort of supply chains that we have today. So with the economic integration, who knows? When you get to the tariffs, you really are getting into hardcore constituencies, right? Things like soybean farmers, things like you all, right? Things of that nature. And when we look at the tariff specifically, it's not affected all industries equal, to be sure. It's really hit very, very hard telecom. You know, it's really hit very hard office machinery. That's where pain is really being pinched.
How can you legally, you know, move the numbers around to make it work?
So, you know, any disruption in a supply chain is going to be expensive, time-consuming, and fraud, and it's not going to be permanent. Values change, the competitive nature of a particular market for manufacturing may change. So all of this, to a certain degree, you'll get more stability by leaving China, but you're not going to find 100% stability. Yes, you got to take that as a starter. China is a hyper-patenting environment, okay? So we're looking at a situation today where if you took all the patent offices in the world, except China, and put them together, the number of patents would be less than those filed in China. This is a very explosive environment. It doesn't mean that IP rights have the same value there, but it does mean that if you don't have rights in China, for want of a better word, you're going to be screwed. The other thing is China also has inexpensive rights. You can get a utility. When I was in private practice, and I don't think my firm appreciated it, but I often encourage smaller clients to get a utility model which would cost you $500 to $1,000.
Thank you guys.
Thanks for watching. For more details and links, check out the full article on SolidSmack.com.